We are here from the Davos Alzheimer Collaborative Brain House studio at the World Economic Forum, and we are so excited to be part of the first ever Brain House and kick off a year-long intensive effort by the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative and its partners to catalyze a global brain health movement. Our discussion today is from insights to action, a data-driven approach to policy change. My name is Mikele Epperly. I'm a global program leader for brain health at Roche, and I'm joined today by two true experts in their field. We have Sasha Bozeat, an internationally renowned researcher in neurodegenerative diagnostics and treatments, and we have Joe Dieleman, an international speaker, author, and lead researcher for resource tracking. But I'll turn it over to both of you and let you further introduce yourselves. Sasha?
Thank you for your very generous introduction, Mikele. But I will say that I have indeed dedicated my career to advancing diagnostics and therapeutics for Alzheimer's disease. And I'm very proud to serve Roche as a global medical science leader for neurodegeneration. Really looking forward to the conversation here today.
Great. Thanks so much. My name is Joe Dieleman. It's a real privilege and honor to be here today. I work at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, where our mission is to deliver timely, relevant, and scientifically valid evidence. And that's really what I think today is all about, is providing evidence to policymakers, to stakeholders who can use that to really inform action.
So, Joe, I know that this is your first World Economic Forum, and Sasha, you and I had the pleasure to attend together last year. Do either of you have any expectations, and what are you most looking forward to? Joe, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, such a privilege to be here. It's just an amazing agenda full of a wide variety of events. I think when I looked at the set of sessions that are going on at the Brain House, it was really exciting to see the diversity of stakeholders that are present, but also the diversity of programs. There's topics on the full life course of brain health. There's conversation about intervention, investment, really spans the gamut, both professionals and academics and social servants as well. So it's really a privilege to be a part of it.
Absolutely. I'm also really excited to see mental health and brain health firmly on the agenda of the World Economic Forum this year. Mental health is back on the main stage this year. And as Joe said, we've got a week-long series of events organized by the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. I think this is really indicative of the increased interest and focus that we're getting now in brain health, which is really encouraging. I think the world is starting to acknowledge that brain health is really fundamental for the health of our economies. And I think this is going to be key to unlocking the investment necessary to tackle neurological and mental health disorders. So very excited to see what this week will bring.
Yeah, I can only pile on to those comments. I'm really excited about the fact that the World Economic Forum, and in particular, the Brain House, has attracted the preeminent thought leaders from a variety of different disciplines to come together, brainstorm how we tackle this global health challenge of brain health, and then come up with concrete actions. So we're going to be leaving at the end of the week with a clear roadmap with commitments from each of the organizations. So I'm excited about what the week holds, but also what the coming year holds.
Absolutely. So it's the beginning of the year, which I think is always a really good time to reflect on where we are with things. And it's a nice time, I think, when you have annual meetings to reflect on the progress that's been made since last year. So maybe, Joe, you could tell us a little bit about the progress that's been made by the IHME in understanding brain health and the challenges associated with it.
Yeah, thank you. At the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, our goal is to measure brain health. And so this year, it's been a really exciting year with a lot of new innovation, a lot of new measurement. The Global Burden of Disease for 2021 was released a few months ago and really focused on understanding the disease prevalence, the mortality, the morbidity of key brain health disorders worldwide. And that's really a focus on 204 countries. So it's meant to be very comprehensive in scope. On the economic side, we've done a lot of work of trying to understand the adverse impact of brain health disorders. What's the impact of people having to leave the workforce? What's the impact of people having to pay for healthcare because of brain health disorders? So that's, a lot of new and exciting data that's come out in the last few months.
Yeah, and to build on the advancements over the past year in data generation, I would also say data utilization. So in a variety of different conferences, meetings, initiatives, the IHME data has been presented and or utilized. In December, it was presented as part of the second annual Swiss National Brain Health Plan meeting. In November, it was presented to the EU Parliament Public Health Subcommittee. It was also part of the Yaoundé Declaration in Cameroon and the United Nations Global Initiative on Aging. And these are just to name a few. But what's particularly exciting is that as all these organizations are speaking to the data, it lends a lot more credibility as that being the single source of truth. And with more credibility, it becomes more actionable for governments and policymakers. So that's been, I think, an exciting advancement over the past year. And I'd love to hear, Sasha, what have some of the advancements been in the AD space?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, as an Alzheimer's expert, I'm really concerned with brain health as a way of addressing the Alzheimer's disease crisis. And I think we've seen a lot of developments over the last year or so. We've known for some time that up to 45% of cases of dementia could potentially be prevented by modifying risk factors. We're now starting to understand what the individual contribution of those risk factors are, and also to try to look at risk reduction strategies and what might be the impact of those. So that's great developments, I think, looking at brain health as a way of decreasing Alzheimer's disease. There's also been a shift in terms of the services available. So memory clinics traditionally would have been a place that everybody would go with a memory concern. But these are really designed for people already with, symptoms, people in the older age of life. They're not fit for purpose as somebody who is concerned about their brain health, somebody's concerned about their risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, or maybe they have a high risk, they've got a family member. They're younger, but they still want to explore what they could potentially do about it. We're now seeing memory clinics evolving to brain health services. And I think this is really going to be key because it gives people an appropriate place to go and get advice on what their risk is, tailored advice on risk reduction strategies. And the great thing about these places as well is it's also a place where people can enroll to longitudinal studies. So we've got studies looking at risk factors. We've got studies looking at preventative strategies. This is a great way to enroll people and collect longitudinal data, which is really critical, I think, to understanding the neurodegenerative diseases and how to prevent them. So I think it's a win-win on both sides. And as we're talking about data, Joe, I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the IHME data on burden. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Like I said before, it's been a big year in new data estimates. What came out in the Global Burden of Disease 2021 study was that about 25% of the world's disability burden is due to brain health disorders. Mm-hmm. And that's not just a high income statistic, but it's a global statistic. And if you look at low income countries or middle income countries, you really see the same thing. 25% of the disability burden is associated or due to brain health disorders. If you want to look at deaths, in 2021, about 11.5 billion deaths were caused by brain health disorders. And that's about 17% of all deaths in the world. And I think, again, a really important feature is that 85% of those deaths are in low and middle income countries. So it really continues to stress this point that brain health disorders are not something that is just present in Europe, North America, and other high income places, but is truly a global challenge and also a global opportunity.
So Joe, IHME also does a lot of forecasting. Do you see the burden of brain disorders growing or waning? And are there any interesting variations in terms of maybe geographic region, particular disease area, sex, age, when it comes to this data?
Yeah, so, it's really important to think and understand that our world is aging and still growing at the same time. And that has really broad ramifications for especially neurological disorders, which are so prevalent at older ages. And so when we do our forecasting, when we look towards the future, a couple things jump out. Number one, in over the course of the next 25 years, we think the number of deaths due to brain health disorders is going to go up by 60%. So it's going to reach above 18 million deaths per year associated with brain health disorders. So really remarkable growth. And the other thing is where that growth is happening. The continent that has the most growth in both size and aging is sub-Saharan Africa. I think that's a key place to understand where a lot of opportunity exists for intervention and opportunities for control in brain health disorders before they're as big as they could.
I mean, that burden is really truly staggering. I'm really quite shocked by that. What can we do about it? I mean, do you have some suggestions, ideas about how we can address this?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I tend to think of three things when I think of interventions for brain health disorders. The first is equitable access. As I've mentioned several times, this is a global problem. Providing interventions and opportunities and diagnostics in only the high income setting really is not going to solve the global problem. And so number one is equitable access across the world. Number two is innovation. These are big problems. And I know there's a lot of innovation going on. I think more is needed. And there's a lot of opportunities that brain health disorders present. And number three is really collaboration. I think that's really what this week is all about. At the Brain House, at the World Economic Forum, is a wide variety of stakeholders coming together, having important conversations, pushing the conversation forward on how to stop these problems before they continue to get bigger.
I completely agree with you, Joe, and just want to build on that point that really collaboration is how we go about tackling this. Although all three of your points were excellent. But I think collaboration is really needed in order to secure the financing and the investment that we need in this space to create awareness around prevention approaches and the importance of early detection. We need collaboration to come up with novel therapies and then to create access to those therapies. The Brain Health Collaborative, which is a group that was co-founded by IHME and Roche, is a global mobilization group with the goal of reducing the burden of brain disorders and advocating for prioritization of brain health with policymakers. We recently came together as a collective to provide commentary on the United States National Alzheimer's Plan Act. And I believe those comments carry much more weight coming as a collective than if we were to do so individually. So I think we're stronger acting together than we are separately.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, the phrase "it takes a village" is something that I think applies very, very well here. This is a global problem, as you've already said, Joe, and it takes a global collective response, I think, to tackle it. And the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, our hosts today, of course, I think are a great example of how you can unite organizations, harness the power together. And they're really making great breakthroughs in terms of increasing access to the diagnostics and the therapeutics that are coming through now, to driving innovations and to healthcare system preparedness. So really, yes, it's about working together and harnessing that collective power.
Thanks, Mikele. You mentioned you mentioned investments, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that. Where are investments needed? What should be prioritized?
We need investments across public, private, and philanthropic sectors. We need governments, employers, industry, and community organizations to make investments both in terms of money and in time. But before you start to get nervous that these investments may be unfeasible, given the amount that would be needed to tackle the huge burden, let me give you an example of why this is truly an investment rather than a cost. So since the 1950s, there's been reductions in mortality due to cardiovascular diseases, and that's translated into 5 additional years of life expectancy. This increase in life expectancy is particularly attributed to advancements in intensive cardiac care, in cardiac medications, and in behavioral changes. We've seen a return on investment for research and medical care of 4 to 1. And when it comes to behavioral change, it's even more, at 30 to 1. So really, we need to shift the conversation from burden and cost to investment and value. By prioritizing the brain capital of our populations, we can increase productivity of our workforce, and we can also reduce healthcare spend. So I think specifically where the investments need to go is prevention, early detection, and timely treatment.
It's really interesting. You mentioned both costs and spending, and that's one of the things we also research at the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. Specifically, we found that across the globe, there's about $1.8 trillion of healthcare spending on brain health disorders. And again, that really spans the gamut, includes all 204 countries. That's 20% of all healthcare spending. The other big thing is that there's a huge impact on the economy because of brain health disorders. We estimate that just people living with brain health disorders leaving the workforce leads to about $1.7 trillion in lost economic productivity. So that's, again, about 2% larger economy could be possible without brain health disorders. That kind of continues to ask, if we're still thinking about investments, costs, spending. Sasha, could you talk a little bit about if that's bearing fruit in the Alzheimer's space and what's going on?
Absolutely. Thankfully, it is. Yes, we are now seeing the benefits, the developments of really decades of investment. So we now have 2 disease-modifying therapies available, which can actually impact the course of Alzheimer's disease. We're now seeing non-invasive but accurate biomarker tests becoming available to be able to diagnose people earlier in the disease, which is when these therapies will be most effective. So we're really reaping the benefits of, as I said, of years of investment. But I want to call out as well that there's investment in terms of the economic sense, but also investment in terms of time. And I think I really would like to call out the clinical trial participants, the people living with Alzheimer's disease who have been so integral to actually us getting where we are today, giving their time, signing up for trials, taking the chance that they may be on active or placebo, knowing that it won't help them, but it will help future generations. And that's really helped us to get where we are. So I think it's about thinking broader in terms of the investment. And we need to keep investing because we have these therapies now, but it's not enough. These are the first step. They bring some changes. And I think that they're an important first step, but we need to keep investing and even increase our investment to make sure that we can bring even more effective therapies through that are less burdensome for patients as well. And to make sure that they are having access to the diagnostics and the therapies that once they're available. So this investment does bear fruit. You have to take a very long-term view about it. I think one of the challenges associated with the disease-modifying therapies that we have available now is really quantifying the clinical value. So you'll be aware of a lot of discussion in the media about the price of these medicines. And we need to take a very long-term approach to this, because we're talking about intervening early in a progressive condition. The costs early on in Alzheimer's disease and other dementias are often borne by the families, by the caregivers. It's later on that we see the big costs to the healthcare system, such as emergency intervention or institutionalization. And it's difficult, I suppose, to tie in those costs and to trade those off, if you like, when we're talking about intervening early. And potentially, slowing down the course by maybe a matter of months, not necessarily years. So a much more sort of long-term view is needed as we think about the clinical value of these medications.
Thanks for bringing up the role of the patient and the importance of always keeping the patients front and center in what we're doing. You talked about some of the advancements made, and yet those of us close to Alzheimer's know there's still so much more to be done. Can you elaborate a bit more on the unmet patient needs that we need to prioritize moving forward?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, we're in a great space that we actually now have these therapies and these diagnostics available, but they are not broadly accessible to people, and we haven't got widespread clinical adoption yet. We're having to really bring about a paradigm shift. Alzheimer's disease is traditionally diagnosed in the moderate stages without a biomarker confirmation of disease. We're having to really turn that on its head. So people need to be identified early. They need to have accurate confirmation of the pathology with biomarker testing in order to be able to get the most benefit, or get any benefit probably, from these therapies that are coming available. So there's really still a lot of work to be done in shaping the healthcare system, in order to be able to get people through faster. There's always long waits for specialists. So people might present in a mild stage, but by the time they reach a diagnosis, they've progressed to moderate, which is then, of course, too late to be for them to receive the therapies. So we need to get people coming through earlier. We need to get people presenting earlier. I think there's still quite a lot of stigma around cognitive impairment, and people don't want to come forward, and family members might not want to acknowledge that it's happening. So I think there's quite a lot of awareness that needs to be done to encourage people to present earlier, even maybe before they're showing symptoms, but maybe coming to the Brain Health Service, looking at their risks of developing and seeing what we can do to potentially mitigate those risks. There's also a big challenge in terms of the actual administration of these therapies, because these at the moment are administered via IV, which is a novel method of administration for Alzheimer's disease, at least. So we're having to see infusion centers being set up. These therapies require additional MRI monitoring that might not be in place. So it's really a paradigm shift, not only in terms of the diagnostics, but also in terms of the treatment pathway. And of course, this is expensive for the healthcare systems, and hence why there's a lot of discussion around the cost of the drugs. It's not just the cost of the drugs themselves, it's about the cost of the care that's associated with administering these drugs. But these are challenges that we are working through. They are challenges we need to work through, and the community working together is making good progress on those.
So interesting, so important. I know one of the real priorities of the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative is developing solutions and designing opportunities that really impact the global South as much as they do the global North. I'm wondering if you can speak to how that's happening in the Alzheimer's space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, we've got evolution in biomarker testing so that we've now got these very accurate, non-invasive blood tests, which should serve to democratize the diagnosis of dementia. The challenge is, if we're not very careful and considerate about access and reimbursement, then they'll only serve to increase inequity. We've seen this already with the disease-modifying therapies, that there's been a lot of work that the community has had to do to lobby for reimbursement, to lobby for access. And I think we'll have the same fight on our hands, really, for the blood-based biomarkers as well. It's really important that we consider the global South, as you say. It's really important that we consider this as a global collective problem. And it's not that the advances in the first world countries are to the detriment of those in low middle income countries.
So we know that the burden of neurological conditions is very high. We know while there's been advancements, there's still a lot more work to be done. And we know we're in the process of building the infrastructure to get that work done. What are you guys most optimistic about moving forward? Joe, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this week and this upcoming year is one of the things I'm most excited about. This is an opportunity to really push aggressively forward, to see a broad set of stakeholders come together, work together, push the conversation forward, and really ask the question, what can we accomplish in a year if we push hard? What are the opportunities that we can pursue?
Yeah, I'm generally very optimistic. I mean, I talk a lot about the work to be done because, of course, there is. But I mean, there are good reasons to be optimistic. Although the actual prevalence of dementia is increasing, if you look at the age-specific incidence, that's actually decreasing. And I think that that's largely in part due to the better management of vascular risk factors and people generally adopting healthier lifestyles. So I think, success fuels success. People start to realize, actually, there is something that I can do about it. And they feel empowered to make those changes. We need to move from the old mindset of dementia is an inevitable part of aging and there's nothing that I can do about it, to actually it's 45% of cases that could be prevented if you modify your midlife risk factors. And now I'm very encouraged to see that also people are talking about going even earlier. We have a session at the Brain House this week talking about a lifelong course to dementia prevention or to brain health. And I think that this is critical because we know if we intervene in midlife, then we can stave off maybe up to 45%. But who knows what we could achieve if we start much earlier. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. When we think about the treatment of Alzheimer's disease as well, we have so much better understanding of the pathophysiology. We know that there's more to Alzheimer's than amyloid. There are other targets that we need to work on. There are some really exciting therapies being developed at the moment. And I think that we're going to see trials happening earlier. These are already happening. We're going to see combination therapies coming in, and we're going to see much more personalized, tailored treatment of Alzheimer's disease, which I'm confident will bring us much more effective therapies for people living with disease.
From my perspective, I'll be honest, I get a little bit frustrated when we have a lot of inspiring discussion and then it doesn't go anywhere. There's no change. There's no action. What I'm most optimistic about is that this week is building a roadmap for the coming year. We will be leaving with the commitments to move us forward as a collective over the next year. So I'm excited about the year to come, but I'm also excited about this next decade. I really believe we are on the cusp of scientific breakthrough and that neuroscience will look different 10 years from now than it does. We are on brain health revolution, and I'm excited to be part of it.
So the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, who are obviously our hosts today, are a great example of uniting organizations, harnessing the collective power, and bringing organizations together to accelerate breakthroughs, healthcare system shaping, and to drive innovation. And Roche is a very proud member of the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. We've been members since its inception, and we're very proud to be supporting the work that they do.